Hello and welcome back to the Edge of the Box podcast, a podcast by WhoScored.com in association with UltimateFan. I'm your host, Dan Bardell, joined by Box Fresh George Elek and Sam Tighe as well to discuss the weekend's Premier League action. George, straight out of bed this morning, no shower, no maintenance really.
I've been awake since 6:20, but I've got a household at the moment with an ill 18-month-old daughter and an ill wife. So that just means that there's no time to shower anytime between 6:20 and 8 o'clock. I haven't had a coffee, I haven't had any water, I haven't had any breakfast. So, yeah, you're lucky I'm even here.
I mean, apologies in advance for George's performance on the podcast today. Might not be the best.
Wait and see.
Sam, how are you?
Haven't had a coffee, George. That is tough.
Very
tough.
Cafetiere.
Yeah, got a cafetiere here. Just going to plunge that down and pour myself a nice cup.
I'll show you my...
I mean, do we need to do this? Yeah.
Why not?
I mean, George saying he hasn't got time for a coffee. You're in the kitchen doing the podcast.
I'm a filter guy. Yeah, I know. I mean, that just tells you what dad life is all about, Dan.
Life's busy. Life comes at us fast, and the Premier League is coming at us fast at the moment as well. Today, we're going to preview Manchester United against Arsenal and Aston Villa against Liverpool, with absolutely no mention of European football whatsoever that may have taken place in the week. So let's start with Manchester United against Arsenal, George, and let's start by reacting to Monday night away at Crystal Palace. Some people were stupid, and even though they knew Manchester United were going to lose, they still predicted a draw in our predictions league. But Manchester United going there and getting beat was probably one of the more obvious things that we thought was going to happen at the weekend, but probably not quite in that manner.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny. I saw Jonathan Wilson, Dr. Wilson, as you call him, tweet after the game that they only conceded 17 shots, so maybe actually it was progress for Manchester United on the day, given how, which you can tell how attuned he is to the Manchester United shot bingo game that we have on the pod.
I said 27, so I was 10 out.
This has been coming, it feels like, for a long time. Like, you cannot consistently get outshot by your opponent. You cannot consistently get bailed out either by, as was the case against Burnley, a very good performance from your goalkeeper, or just very often teams seemingly missing loads of opportunities against you. Eventually it was all going to click, and this was it against Crystal Palace, where they were second best in every single measure. And for them to go 1-0 down after 12 minutes when Elise's first goal went in, so kind of game state would dictate at that point, you'd probably anticipate in a game that, before the match, odds didn't have much between the two sides, you'd think the team who go behind would probably get some kind of foothold in the game. But that wasn't the case whatsoever. Palace were the better side from the first whistle till the last. There were calamitous performances from individual players for United. Interestingly, Dan, you mentioned, and I think we're going to get onto this in a second, but just to kind of jump forward a bit, you joked about the current performances levels of Bruno Fernandes, and I'm not disagreeing with you, but I did think we saw there how much of a difference he does still make to United, both in terms of a quality point of view in the final third, and also he's a massive trier. Like, he's someone who off the ball, he gives his all, and that's why his stock is still incredibly high with United fans. So if this is a glimpse into what a Bruno-less United looks like, it's even worse than the former edition.
Yeah, and Sam, someone whose stock isn't particularly high at the moment is Casemiro. Poor old Casemiro. I mean, last season, I think we all knew it wasn't a great signing in terms of the outlay and his age, and Real Madrid don't often let players go if they think they've got something to offer still, because you look at Modric and Kroos still going strong in their midfield. So they signed Casemiro, and I think we all kind of knew it was a little bit of a panic. But in fairness, last season he was very good. He had good games. He scored important goals. He was a big part of a team that finished third. So you think, okay, maybe we might have got this wrong. Casemiro this season, geez, the contrast is stark.
Yeah, so I don't like the fact that everyone keeps calling him old because he's 32. I'm 34 and I'm not old. So first of all, I just want to say I don't really appreciate that. But this man has played a lot of football, about 15 professional seasons under his belt now. So I don't know how much more a rock-hard, tenacious defensive midfielder can take physically, especially when you start your career in Brazil, where the football there is just absolutely hectic. And he's been an absolutely brilliant defensive midfielder. So I really hate talking about him like this. I've written an article for WhoScored.com about the fact that he is now basically not very good. And it hurts because He's literally one of the best defensive midfielders to have ever played this game. He's 5 Champions League winners' medals and 3 La Liga winners' medals. He's even got a trophy with Manchester United, and he scored in the final last year to help win the Carabao Cup. It was the first goal of 2 against Newcastle. And I'm glad you didn't rewrite history there when you introduced the topic, because he was a very positive presence for them last season, but it has fallen off a cliff, and it does happen in football, doesn't it? That is how it goes. One day it just drops.
Not like this though. This is like
yeah. I mean,
huge drop off.
It's genuinely concerning. I do think that there's a case to be made here that if we sit here and we criticise Manchester United's tactical openness every week, their midfield is flooded. The gaps between the lines are huge. They play a high press and a deep line. The midfielders have no chance. The defensive line is unprotected. If the setup is so bad, then it is going to be a contributing factor to Casemiro looking this bad. He's clearly not energetic and athletic enough anymore to cover this amount of space. But he played at centre-back against Palace, and he was involved in 14 attempted tackles. Now, that's partially the system's too open, and partially what you're doing, mate. Why are you jumping out into midfield constantly and leaving 36-year-old Johnny Evans back there against Mateta?
Maybe because he's a midfielder. I think might be why he's jumping into midfield.
Maybe because he's always been sort of an aggressive defensive midfielder. But you have to be a bit smarter than this. If you're being put into a back four, if he was part of a back three, I would say go, jump out, go. But do what you like. You've got 2 behind you to be a shield. You can't do. I think this is really naive from him, and this is why I saw a couple of questions on Twitter like, does he care? And I also don't like those kind of questions either about football, because we don't know what's going on in their heads.
They do. They all care.
But what he was doing was really irresponsible. And I felt a bit sorry for Johnny Evans at the time.
In my mind, it still comes down to a real lack of foresight from United in their transfer dealings, where it wouldn't surprise me at all if Casemiro left United and went and played the role that he played at Madrid all those years so well and did it well again. Like it reminds me a bit of the Pogba signing, where United went out and they signed a player in Paul Pogba who played on the left of the midfield 3, who was an absolute genius of popping up in the half space and really hurting teams. And they put him in the middle of the midfield and put everything through him, and his attacking threat was completely nullified. With Casemiro, he played at the base of midfield 3 with Modric and Kroos either side of him. Possession went through the players either side, and he was the person who would break up play and distribute to them. United signed him and they put him in the base of midfield and they put all possession through him. And again, or they play him at centre back like they are here. Like they don't use these players in the roles that made them world class ever. Like we've got a big signing, we're going to put them in the middle of our team and build a team around them. And it's like, well, hold on, that isn't what they did. That isn't why they were good. So we can sit here and talk about Casemiro looking terrible at age 32 against Elise and Eze and a pretty talented team of young attacking players, but he's kind of being hung out to, like, he was terrible when he played centre back against Coventry in that second half as well, like against Coventry, but he's not a centre back.
Yeah, I mean, there's failures all over the place with Manchester United, isn't there? I mean, you look at Kobbie Mainoo in the midfield. He must, 1 week he's next to Casemiro, who can't run. The next week he's next to Eriksen, who can't run. Amrabat, when he plays, looks like he can't run. Kobbie Mainoo just like, can we just please have someone next to me who can actually get around the pitch?
Well, they do have that. It's called Scott McTominay, but they don't want to pair him with him either because he's a nutter. So they're like, well, hang on a minute. What if he picks up too many bad habits from Scott McTominay? So they're sort of flicking through all the possible partners here, and they've come to, I don't know what to do. George, you talking about players out of position there just reminded me that they did a half a season of Pogba on the left wing. And you know what? It wasn't bad. It actually kind of worked, mostly because it just let him attack and create. But it was still
most similar to his job at Juve. I mean, it's like...
But it was still totally an imperfect solution.
Yeah, I mean, looking at Casemiro's stats from last season to this, there's only one metric that he hasn't regressed in, and that's tackles per 90. It's still at 3.7. Everything else is down. Goals are down. He's only got 1 goal this season compared to 4 last season. Assists down 2 this season, 3 last season. Interceptions is down from 1.4 to 0.8. Dribbled pass per 90 is the interesting one. Last season it was 1.9. This season it's 2.7. And Martin Lawrence's favourite stat, tackle success rate, was 66.2 last season. It's 57.7 this season. So not only is he regressing on the eye test, also, the WhoScored stats back it up.
Yeah, and he set a record for this season on Monday night, unfortunately. He was dribbled past 8 times. which is the most in a single game in the Premier League this season. And for a bit of context there, Van Dijk has been dribbled past twice this entire campaign.
It's not good, is it? You can't dress that up. I feel we do come on here every week and absolutely hammer Manchester United, which probably isn't ideal because I imagine a lot of people that use Who Scored and watch podcasts are Manchester United fans. But what can you do? We can only talk about what's put in front of us, and they're rubbish. That is all there is to it. Apparently, they've used 8 centre backs this season. George, should we try and name the 8 players to have played at centre back this season?
Oh, that's a good exercise.
I don't actually know the answer. I'm just assuming we might be able to do it between us.
Maguire, Evans, Casemiro. Am I doing all 8?
Well, no, we can join in Camboire,
Lissandro.
Oh, yeah, nice. Lissandro, Lindelof,
6,
Varane 7.
Varane.
Luke Shaw, maybe the 8th.
Oh, probably. Yeah, it will be Shaw, I reckon, because he played left centre back when Lissandro was injured for a bit.
Yeah, it's got to be Luke Shaw.
There we go. Easy.
Well, that was a fun game.
And if you don't know the answer, no one can tell us it's wrong. Perfect.
Yeah, that's game over. In the back of my mind, when we were thinking, that's Phil Jones rolling around my head. Even though I know he doesn't play for them anymore. Did he play a game at the start of the season? Eric Boyd.
What about?
Did he play a game at the start of the season?
I've just thought of one that we haven't said.
Mm.
Has McTominay not played centre back all the season?
No,
I don't think so. But Bruno has.
He's their main goal scorer, George.
Bruno, I'm going to have a look. Hold on.
Bruno did half an hour, didn't he? But it was in the cup.
We can't count a starting centre backs. Let's say.
Okay. Where's
Shaw?
Shaw?
Starting centre back.
And this is according to Who Scored. Yes, Shaw's played 2 games centre back.
There we go.
Hold on.
Well, I think we did.
Hold on. Well, I think there are 9. McTominay 1 game at centre back according to Who Scored. So
no, we can't count that.
What do you mean?
Who scored? Really? If it's on their own website, then the graphic I've been sent says 8.
Wow.
What am I to do?
So we actually beat the game.
Yeah, we beat the game.
We outsmarted the algorithm.
He played centre.
But I don't necessarily think that's the algorithm's fault. It's whoever from Who Scored looked at the stats and then compiled the graphic. So it could be Sam. Could be Ben, could be Dan Worth. It could be all 3 of them, a combination of the 3. Who knows? But yes, someone Who Scored. We've just proven you wrong. So
different Sam, by the way, people. Different Sam, not me.
That's what we do on this podcast. Let's talk about Gareth Southgate, George. Still the link. What?
Sorry. As segues go,
No, there's no segue. We finished the centre backs. Talking of centre backs, Gareth Southgate used to be a centre back.
Love it.
George. He's been heavily linked with the Manchester United job still. Seems to be Ineos's preference if Ten Hag does go, which surely he's got to. Southgate hasn't managed a club team for 15 years. Is that Manchester United hurtling from one disaster to another?
Maybe. I kind of see Southgate as possibly being quite a good interim coach. It feels like of all of the, as in he would obviously get the job full time. But it feels like from what we're seeing from Sir Jim Ratcliffe's early actions at United, he's trying to completely tear the whole place apart and then patch it back together again. And for all of Southgate's deficiencies as a tactician, which I think some people think he's basically the worst tactician in world football, I think that's quite harsh. And I think even though sometimes he's been showing up a little bit, I think his attention to detail is always pretty good. And yeah, he's a pragmatist rather than someone who's going to go out and play free-flowing football the whole time. But I think there's a place for that. And, it's not dissimilar in terms of outlook to the way that a former United manager seemed to approach tactics. But I think the thing with the Southgate that you absolutely cannot argue with, even his biggest detractor, is that he's amazing at building a good culture within the England camp. Players seemingly absolutely love playing for him.
I get that, but isn't it different? Isn't it different doing that at international level?
Is it different?
It'll be different doing it on a daily basis rather than every sort of month or 6 weeks.
But I would also argue, and this comes back to Dan, our favourite point of conversation, where you've got a manager who's about to probably win his 57th Champions League pretty soon, who's basically consistently said that his management style is basically just build a culture and let the players do their thing. And even though I'm not someone who necessarily thinks that's the best way to manage, there are a lot of people who think he's like the best ever for doing that. And I'm not
keeps laughing in your face, George, doesn't it?
I'm not comparing.
He's laughing at you.
And Hosselu, who had that down as being the one to save him this time. But so even though I do think there might be an argument here where it feels like things have been very toxic under Ten Hag, I think that there was a time, even though Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was, in my mind, one of the poorest elite manager or elite club managers in terms of actual kind of style of play that we've seen. There was a time where the good times were back at United, and seemingly players wanted to play for him, and that yielded some positive times. So maybe just in terms of a complete and utter blank canvas appointment, it may not last longer than 2 or 3 years, but maybe Southgate coming in would do something to improve that and win over some, just basically change what has become not a particularly conducive environment to win football matches.
I think it would make more sense. Let's say the England squad was full of Manchester United players. I think it would probably make a bit more sense there. But I guess you could. I mean, I'm a massive Southgate fan. I like Gareth Southgate.
There are a few.
You've got Shaw, you've got Rashford, you've got Mainu.
You're putting Southgate with Mason Mount. I mean, what's not to like?
That's true.
They absolutely adore each other.
Disproved my own point.
I think there are quite a few, to be fair. I think this would be an absolute stab in the dark, basically, and not to sit on the fence, but I think it's impossible to say how this would go. Not only, as you say, 15 years since he managed the club, but also international football is to an extent a bit of a different sport to the football we watch every single week. It's not the same. International tournament football is not the same type of football, right? And so he has been very specifically planning and creating teams for those environments for a long, long time. And he is going to then move into a daily regime of something completely different. And like on the face of it, he seems like a very cautious tactician, a good one, but a cautious one. So kind of like a poor man's Thomas Tuchel, but with like a human side of Graham Potter, the sort of emotional intelligence. So that sounds really good, doesn't it, on paper? And then you give him Mason Mount every week and he'd probably be fine. But it's impossible to know how Gareth Southgate would thrive or not in a club environment. Absolutely no idea. And also, just to finish the point, I'm pretty sure I read a report saying Sir Jim Ratcliffe is bringing the United staff back into the office. He's getting rid of working from home. Well, Gareth Southgate's been working from home for like 15 years. How is he supposed to just transition back into the office? Can't be easy.
It's difficult. I suppose England were at their pretty much lowest ebb when Southgate picked England up. I guess Manchester United probably are at their lowest ebb right now.
I also do think there are parallels to, like, I personally think, and this is quite clearly in part my EFL bias coming through, but I find it bizarre that Kieran McKenna isn't being spoken about this job, given what he's done over the last couple of years and given his history at the club previously.
I think he'd be silly. Do you think he'd be silly to do that now?
I mean, I think when you look at the financials involved from a personal standpoint, if you take that job, you probably don't have to work again.
Reputation is everything, though, George. Your reputation is everything. It's not all about money.
I think his reputation would probably be intact even if it didn't go okay, given what he's done previously. But what I was going to say is the reason why often these appointments don't work at these kind of top clubs, whether it's Potter at Chelsea, whether it's Moyes at United, Hodgson at Liverpool, is with Gareth Southgate, you got someone his job right now is to work with elite players and to turn elite players into a functioning side. Yes. It doesn't happen too often and it's international breaks or whatever, but that is his job, is to work with elite players. And that is something he has over those guys I just mentioned. It's something he has over McKenna. It's something that he didn't have when he was Borough manager previously. And that experience is probably pretty crucial in terms of trying to take United back to where they want to be. So, I mean, I'm not saying I love it, but I can understand the reasoning if it is true. Although, I mean, there are some people who seem to think this is basically happening, and there are some people who seem to think it's absolutely not happening. So I'm not entirely sure what's going on.
It would intrigue me. I think at the start of next season, I'd be intrigued to how that goes. It would be something that would interest me a lot, seeing Southgate. And just, as I say, I'm a huge advocate of Gareth Southgate and what he's done for England. He does things I don't like sometimes, but so do most managers. But I'm a massive fan of what he's done for England, and seeing him manage Manchester United, there would be something really interesting about that. And Manchester United have spent a lot of money in the last decade since Alex Ferguson left. WhoScored have got a little graphic for us, which the viewers, the listeners won't see because they're listening, but the viewers will see it now. Their top 10 record signings. WhoScored have basically compiled this top 10 and then said whether they're a hit, a miss, or if it's too soon to say. So Manchester United's 10 record signings there. How many hits, bona fide hits, do you reckon they've got, Sam?
So of the 10 most expensive signings, how many have worked out? Presumably 2.
I mean, if that. 1.
Yeah, it's 1. So we'll go through the list and see if we agree with what WhoScored have done here. So record signing. Anyone know who the record signing is?
Pogba?
Yeah, Pogba, £89 million. That's a miss. We agreeing with that? Yep.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yep. Second one, have a stab at who second is?
Anthony?
Oh, yep. Miss. Yeah.
Miss. Hard miss.
100%. Worst signing ever.
65 miles right.
It's Harry Maguire in third.
Oh,
£80
God.
million. That's a red. That's a miss as well.
We still have 80. Jesus.
Yeah. Fourth is Lukaku, 75 million. Miss.
I mean, that's an
Still
interesting
might work
one.
out. It's a miss currently, though, isn't it? There's not going to be on loan to Dortmund, is there? That's still a miss.
It's a miss.
Lukaku?
He's long gone.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
I was talking about Sancho in fifth.
Oh,
No,
sorry.
I was saying that Lukaku had one great season when they finished second on Mourinho.
Yeah.
I think it's got to be a miss, though, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It's too soon to
the
say
top.
on Lukaku.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were saying.
That's the top 5, all red, all in the red zone, all misses. Sixth is Højlund, 64 million. It's too soon to say.
Yeah.
Seventh, Casemiro, 60 million. Miss, they've got down here. Then we've got in eighth, Di Maria, 60 million as a miss.
Yeah.
Ninth is Mason Mount, 55 million. Too soon to say.
Yeah.
And 10th, the only hit is Bruno Fernandes, for 47 million. How much was Onana?
He'd be the biggest hit in the history of world football for WhoScored.
WhoScored would have that picture on the graphic. We wouldn't see anyone else but Onana on that graphic now. Now, let's contrast that with Arsenal. So obviously, there's some similarities here because, Manchester United lost a long-term manager, Arsenal lost a long-term manager. How have they gone since then? It took Arsenal some time, but obviously they've caught up now into the elite outfit that they are today. How many hits do you reckon are in Arsenal's top 10, according to WhoScored?
Who would it be? So I reckon 5.
5, George?
6.
No, it's 7.
Ooh.
Wow.
We all know who Arsenal's record signing is. It's Declan Rice, 105 million. I like the way the players Arsenal have signed this season on the Manchester United ones, the ones that they've signed this season. It's too soon to say. The ones that Arsenal have signed, hits, bang. It just shows the differences in the two clubs. So yeah, Declan Rice is a green. He's a hit. Any memory of who the second record signing is for Arsenal?
Benjamin White or something.
Nope.
Kai Havertz.
Nope. He's third. And he's a hit.
Does the player still play for them?
Nope.
See, that's Havertz being a hit is amusing.
Aubameyang.
Because
No. Aubameyang.
I don't have anything else.
It's Nicolas Pepe.
Oh Jesus!
Oh my God!
That rivals Anthony.
Yeah, he's 72 million. That's a miss.
72 million.
I don't think what Pepe did though, because he was so bad.
Would have kissed a lot of frogs, haven't you?
Well, because he was so bad playing on the right hand side, he basically enabled Saka to come through earlier by being bad. Actually, he could say Pepe hit in some ways because he enabled Saka to come through by being so bad himself. Third is Kai Havertz, 65 million. He's been classed as a hit. Fourth is Aubameyang, 56 million, hit. Fifth is Ben White, 50 million, hit. Sixth feels a bit harsh to me. Lacazette, miss, 47 million. Even Havertz is a hit. You've got to say Lacazette's a hit.
I definitely think Havertz is too. I mean, I love him, and I think he's been good recently. But that's the most recency bias hit I've ever heard in my whole life.
But also, Jesus is underneath. Jesus is underneath as a hit.
What's the difference between Aubameyang and Lacazette here?
Aubameyang scored a lot of goals, didn't he?
I think Lacazette's non-penalty record for them is poor, wasn't it? Or is that just a Leon?
I think he never really got above 10. But like he put, I don't know. I would put Lacazette and Aubameyang in the same bucket of they were pretty troublesome, and once Arteta got rid of them, Arsenal really flew.
I don't think Lacazette was a bad egg. Aubameyang towards the end was obviously a bad egg. I think if you're saying Havertz and Jesus are hits, I think it's harsh to call Lacazette a miss, in my opinion. I guess you can't put that it's too soon to say. And in
fairness, Lacazette's open play goal per 90 was good for Arsenal.
Yeah. I never looked at him as being bad. I just thought age caught up with him towards the end, and his legs couldn't do what they could do previously. But I don't think he was a bad sign.
He's only 32 now.
Is it? Right. Oh, that's old. As we've discovered, he's finished. He's got nothing left at 32. He's only 6 years younger than me. He's completely finished. Thomas Partey's 8th, 45 million. That's gone down as a hit. Ozil, 9th, 43 million, hit. And then Timber is 10th, too soon to say. Where's Alexis Sanchez? How much was he?
just below.
Below 36 million. That's not bad.
It'd be nice. It'd be really nice if he was on both lists and he was a hit on Arsenal's and a miss on United's. Would be
because it would have been that would have happened, I guess.
Absolutely.
I thought Odegaard would have featured here as well, but apparently not.
It wasn't that much Odegaard at all. He was
quite
cheap. Let's talk about Arsenal then, as they are in the title race, and we haven't mentioned them yet. I mean, we're well into this preview now, and let's start with Declan Rice, George. PFA Player of the Year for you?
Given that Rodri's my pick isn't even on the short list, I think
that's outrageous.
I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous to have Haaland on there. I guess it's because they didn't want 3 City players on the list.
They replaced Haaland.
Rodri is, obviously. Like
he should be on there, shouldn't they?
An esteemed Sky Sports pundit called him a League 2 striker this season. It's
was that me or Dan?
Yeah, I'm not one anymore. It's possibly. I just find it really hard to differentiate between players who've all been very good. Like I think Rice deserves immense credit for the way that he's played. I think the fact he's played in 2 different roles and done both exceptionally. My take on here a couple of weeks ago that he's better playing in the base of midfield has aged terribly. He's been unbelievable and he's been a huge signing for them. I think I'm a bit biased where I like it when players like Rodri, like Rice, get the big gongs rather than players who have loads of goal involvements and get in there on that basis alone. So I think at this current moment in time, I'd say yes.
Rice isn't short of his goal involvements, though, is he? To be fair,
no, he's not. No.
But, yeah,
three horse race for the PFA Player of the Year, sir.
I voted for Martin Odegaard in the FWA, and so he's my pick for Player of the Year.
I'm sure about that. Brilliant second half of the season. I don't remember him being too involved first half of the season. I think everyone was saying he was having a bit of an off season compared to last season.
I think he had
first half.
I think he had a bit of a quiet 6 weeks, but he had an injury. He was nursing something along, and he was just playing anyway, which I certainly respect. But yes, I'd say since about November, he's been the one that he basically makes me make funny noises, like when I watch him, and so like that's brilliant.
I love him.
That's how I judge Player of the Year. Like who made me make the weirdest noise.
So surely then Udogie should be the PFA Player of the Year.
That is, sure. I don't really have a comeback for that.
No. Obviously you've done your vote there. You know the players aren't allowed to vote for players for their own team. You allowed to vote for players from your own team.
I play with my neighbours on a Thursday night, so I trust me, I didn't.
Sorry, the team you support. Be facetious, Sam.
No, there's no such rule. There's no such.
You didn't decide to vote for Ollie Watkins, the man with the most goal involvements in the Premier League.
I opted to vote for somebody other than Ollie Watkins. I tussed between Rice and Watkins and Martin Odegaard, and I ended up on Odegaard. For what it's worth, I think there's something sinister going on with the FWA award, which it's a bit of a conspiracy. We don't need to go into it, but I do find it's not surprising whatsoever that an English player wins it every time we're about to go to a tournament, just because it might, get someone an interview somewhere over the summer.
There needs to be like the football writers have their thing that you just talked about. I can't be part of that.
You could if you did any writing whatsoever, and then joins the FWA.
I
do my work verbally. So where's my chance to vote? Where did George?
Should we launch the? No, not really.
Where's our opportunity? I just want to be part of something.
We can hire you for NTT20.com, Danny.
Yeah, my EFL knowledge is absolute pants. So.
Well, you can just write loads of articles about Villa's stay down in the Championship.
Yeah, I could do that.
Should we launch the podcasters football awards?
Yeah, that needs to be a thing because it's not fair. I've managed to, you break into the industry, you get to work for some good companies, and then talk about football, and then I don't get any input into anything. I get to say anything, or Sam there's had a chance to influence.
You cannot sit there and say you don't get to say. You talk all the time.
Yeah, but I don't get a chance to vote. I don't vote for anything. I only get to do the votes that everyone else gets to do.
Next time you're on TalkSport, which will probably be in about 15 minutes, just shout. Morning, actually. Just shout who you think is your Player of the Year, and that's it. That'll do.
I think it's probably Declan Rice. I want it to be Ollie Watkins, but I think it's probably Declan Rice. But then I also think it's going to depend who wins the league, isn't it? Although does it work?
Phil Foden's odds on for the PFA Player of the Year.
I mean, he won the FWA version, so it is a bit of a tell on that sometimes. Yeah. But and that will influence some of the votes. I don't think that who wins the league should necessarily, when it's this tight, it should really dictate. I don't think you should get to the end of the season like this and be like, oh, they finished a point ahead of Arsenal, so it has to be a City player. Like, I don't think that's fair. That's outcome bias.
But my biggest issue with this, which is why I think the Ballon d'Or is good, because it's annual, is that in my mind, if Phil Foden were to score a hat-trick on final day to win City the title, that should have a huge bearing on who wins player of the season. Yeah. Right? I agree with you that voting it shouldn't matter really, but if your star turn is under pressure in like the biggest game of the season, right at the end of the season, and your actions are the thing that triggers winning the title, then I think that should come into it. But that
is fair. I think that is fair. But I just don't like the idea of like, if you think that Rodri's been the best over 37 games, but Arsenal won the league on the last day, I have to vote for an Arsenal player now. No, you don't. I agree. A lot of people do that though, I think.
Yeah. Okay then. Well, I'm a bit wary that we've not really talked about the title race in this match preview, but we've come to an end of Manchester United against Arsenal. Let's have some predictions then, George.
If there's any other team we were talking about second, you would just skip the second game. But because we're talking about a certain Aston Villa,
big game in the Premier League.
It's ignore the title race.
No. To be in my defence, the running order that I've been sent, there isn't actually much talk about Arsenal at all in there anyway.
Yeah, and we don't want to talk about Villa.
Yeah, fair enough.
I suppose we could carry on.
No, let's do it. United 0, Arsenal 3.
Yeah, exactly the same here. 3-0.
Oh,
Sam?
I took 2-0 to Arsenal.
2-0 to Arsenal. Okay, then. Let's do the rest of our predictions then before we get to Aston Villa against Liverpool. Key game in the title race to start. Fulham against Manchester City, Sam?
3-1 to City.
Same here. I've done 3-1 to City as well. George?
Good.
2-0 City.
2-0 City. Bournemouth v Brentford, please, George.
2-1 Bournemouth.
I've gone for 3-0 to Bournemouth. Wow. George?
You've already done me.
I have gone for 2-1 to Bournemouth, same as George.
2-1 to Bournemouth. I've done some wild ones there. Everton, Sheffield United, I've gone for 4-0, Sam, to Everton. Sam?
I've gone for 1-0 to Everton.
1-0 to Everton. George?
2-1 Everton.
I've got ground to make up there. I need to do something special. I've got another wild one here. Newcastle against Brighton, please, Sam.
2-1 to Newcastle.
George?
3-1 Newcastle.
I've gone for 3-0 to Newcastle. My thinking behind some of these predictions is, last home game of the season for some teams here. Often on the last home game of the season, people go wild. Yeah, they just go wild, shackles are off. So I've gone for high scoring games. Spurs v Burnley, please, George.
2-2.
Oh, I like it. Sam?
Yes, I've also taken the Desmond, although I don't really believe in it.
Oh, really? God.
I think that's heart over head. It's what I want to happen.
Yeah. I mean, if it was what you wanted to happen, surely you'd have Burnley to win 5-0. But yeah.
That will be enough.
Yeah, that's true. I've gone for Spurs 3, Burnley 2. West Ham v Luton. I have gone for West Ham 1, Luton 0. That's David Moyes putting on a show for his last home game, by the way. The 1-0 win there. Sam?
His last ever game in charge of West Ham.
Sam? I've gone for the 2-1 win to West Ham.
George?
I've gone for the 2-1 win for Luton.
Oh, there he is. Wolves against Palace, please, George.
1-1.
1-1. I've gone for 2-2. Sam, is that a 1-1 for you as well?
1-1, yeah.
Lots of pressure on you here, getting this right for Dr. Jonathan Wilson. But the penultimate of the game of the season. Forest v Chelsea, please, Sam.
1-1.
1-1. George?
0-2 Chelsea.
I have gone for 3-1 to Chelsea. Right then, let's talk about Aston Villa against Liverpool. And first on the agenda, unfortunately, Sam, is to try and unpick what happened last night in the Europa Conference League and look at how that may impact Villa going into the back end of the Premier League season. Limping towards the finish line a little bit, players running on empty. He looks at the bench last night and he's like, geez, what do we do here? There's not much to bring on here at all, is there? Fatigue has caught up with Villa. The amount of games played has caught up with Villa. It's been a sensational season regardless. It's feeling like a limp towards fourth now, isn't it?
Yes, 100%. The season has been 1 month too long for these players, unfortunately, with just the amount of games they've had to play and the amount of injuries that have just derailed any opportunities to rotate. And I look back at little moments in the season and look at sort of how they've cost Villa a little bit here in terms of trying to keep things fresh. Like that first Conference League group game, losing to Legia away, put the pressure on Villa to then win all of the games from that point. And that meant that Ollie Watkins could not be rested as much as you probably would have wanted to for European nights in the group stage. He actually ended up starting quite a lot of those Thursdays before Christmas in scenarios where I think when we all plan out the squad, well, John Duran starts all those games, right? John Duran gets 90 minutes in all 6 of those group games as you sort of split your responsibilities in your head. But once you lose the opening game and the pressure's on, then you have to kind of go full tilt on Thursdays. And I look back at all these little things here, and they have ripple effects. And obviously the injuries are a massive part of it too. Losing Ramsey for basically the whole season, Zaniolo really struggling, all that stuff. Having to play Rodgers as the left mid when I think probably the idea would have been a little bit more support forward like we saw for half an hour against Brighton. All these little things have added up. And in the end, it has just brought them to their knees. And we're talking about players like Ezri Konsa, who have played 4,500 minutes of football this season. And it's just unlike anything that these guys have experienced in a long time. Ezri would have had to play probably about that in the Championship, but that was literally like 6 years ago. So 5, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, actually. So this is tough. This is really tough on the legs of Luiz. 3 ACL tears, everything kind of crumbling down. Emery has done an amazing job of just keeping it all afloat and just keeping them intact. And yes, Villa are kind of receiving a little bit of a helping hand from Spurs at the moment with them losing so many games in a row. And Villa may end up not taking a single point from the last 3 games and still getting 4th, which sounds kind of ridiculous. But Spurs may allow that to happen. But I'm just, as with a lot of Villa fans, I'm trying to keep the positives in mind.
Yeah,
I'm trying not to let this really damp ending change my opinion on the season, and specifically for players as well. Like Douglas Luiz, I've just watched him have a total nightmare for 180 minutes against Olympiacos. Like he's probably never played worse for Villa. That should not change the fact that he has been unbelievable over the course of the camp. I'm just trying really hard to keep that in my mind with players and with the team and with the manager, because it's a season worth celebrating.
Yeah, 100%. Completely agree with you. And you have to give Olympiacos credit as well over the 2 legs. I thought they managed the 2-legged tie better than Villa did, and they were clinical in front of goal. I think that's the difference. Olympiacos will have been in Europe for the last decade. Let's say Villa haven't appeared in it once. They know how to manage a 2-leg tie, and they were tactically very, very good, and they did a number on Villa. So in some ways, I think you have to take your hat off to Olympiacos, because I think they were brilliant, and good luck to them in the final. You mentioned there about the injuries. I think Emery. There's a no excuse culture at Villa. McGinn mentioned it last night in his post-match interview. I think they've coped brilliantly with everything that's been thrown their way. But the one injury that's catching up with them now is Kamara. Yeah. Because he enables the rest of the midfield to do the stuff they're good at. And even Luiz, his form since Kamara has not been there, he hasn't been the same player. Even though he's still been good to a high level, he hasn't quite been the same. McGinn's had to play in the middle, especially with Tielemans missing at the moment. So the players haven't been able to do the stuff that they're good at. That's the one, if I had to pinpoint an injury that's really killed them, I think it's probably Kamara.
It's probably had the biggest effect, yes. Everything else has been largely coped with one way or another. I mean, there is an argument to throw in here, Dan, that the injury that's actually killed this is Emi Martinez. Because the first leg was a disaster, but would it have been as bad with Emi Martinez in goal? No, it would not have been.
Might not have been as bad with me in goal.
I mean,
Robin Olsen Dora.
So Robin Olsen against Brighton was really, really good, and fair play to him. Fair play to him, and I don't think he was terrible against Olympiacos in the first leg, but obviously we're talking about 2 different guys here, and so what the real late twist here, the final knife was probably Martinez there, coming off at half time against Chelsea, dropping those, going from 2-0 up to 2-2.
And then that was a big point in the grand scheme of things.
It looks great when Chelsea are beating teams 4 and 6-0. That 2-2 is looking fantastic. But yeah, that injury maybe is actually the real tipping point at the last point of the season. But definitely over the course of a 3-4 month span, it's Kamara going down, affecting Luiz, because Luiz doesn't play that well with McGinn. But Tielemans does. So the Tielemans-McGinn partnership was really good. And then Tielemans got injured. So it's just been one of those things. And look, other clubs fans that, they're saying, oh, Newcastle, we've had it worse. This team. I know everyone's had injuries and stuff, but like when you have to play 52 games or whatever it is that Villa are going to end up on with 14 players, it really is very, very difficult.
Yeah. George, do you think Villa are going to get fourth? I mean, we live in a world where they could get 0 points and still qualify for the Champions League. Spurs, I guess it's that big Spurs-Man City game. I mean, Burnley might do something at the weekend, but it feels very much like Villa might not beat Liverpool on Monday, and then it all comes down to Tuesday and Spurs playing Chelsea. Spurs playing Liverpool. No, Man City. Jesus, I'll get the right team eventually. Spurs playing Man City.
I think you'll be fine.
It's easy for you to say, isn't it, George? No eggs in the basket.
With no bias.
Yeah, that's true.
I wouldn't be overly surprised if you didn't get another point. I think you kind of look a bit gone. And frankly, a home game against Liverpool and then an away game to Palace right now, especially that Palace away game looked to Villa fans like quite a nice away game to finish the season with until about 3 weeks ago, and now it looks really, really difficult. With Spurs, though, the frustrating thing is that away from home they look absolutely horrendous. It's just annoying that their only away game left is Sheffield United away, which is a game you probably still expect them to win. It's going to come down to, if they do beat Burnley, it might be a little bit nervous in that game against that Spurs City game. It's going to be one of those games where Villa's biggest game of the season will be a game they're not even involved in.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But massively odds on that you'll be fine. Probably massively odds on you'd be fine if you didn't get a single more point. But it's not done yet.
Part of me thinks, Sam, Monday night, extra day to recover, which we haven't had many times in Europe this season, after playing in Europe this season. Part of me thinks Liverpool haven't got anything to play for. They're going to finish third regardless. We've not got a European Cup final to look forward to now. It's almost like maybe Monday becomes a bit of a cup final atmosphere under the lights at Villa Park, and the players and the fans all come together and the players find some energy from somewhere. Maybe a couple of players return. Part of me thinks Villa can do it on Monday.
Yeah, part of me thought that Villa could do it on Thursday last night.
No, I didn't really feel like that.
So it's one of those things where, like, all season long, you've watched this team prove doubters wrong, leap over hurdles, get it done when it matters. If you've watched that happen for like 50 games, you are then conditioned to think that like they've got one more in them. But you have to marry that up, that sort of niggling feeling in your brain, with what you're watching on the pitch, which is they are literally like they're exhausted, like they're like hands on knees, like haunched over. Is that the phrase? What's the phrase I'm looking for?
Yeah,
on their haunches.
It made sense anyway.
On their haunches, whatever it was, against Brighton after 30 minutes. Like the ball went out for a throw in, and like 4 of them went like that, and I was like,
running to get the water from the dugout.
Oh no, yeah, it was like, and that's you have to marry these two things up, like, and it's hard. It's hard to split them and to see the truth. I'm not to I've picked Villa to get a point in this game, and I have no idea why. But I've just figured it out because all season long they've dug something out. But this month is different. It's been different.
It's a good job they have had that couple of game spell where they beat Arsenal away and Bournemouth at home to get 6 points in a week. That feels like that was a huge week now. And even the point against Chelsea in the game after, that little mini run feels pivotal now. So obviously there's the 7 point difference between Villa and Spurs.
The point against Chelsea means that Spurs have to win their last 3 games now to overtake Villa, pretty much because of the goal difference.
Yeah, and obviously that disaster goal disallowed right at the end.
Yeah, so like that point is that it could be everything. It could mean that Villa get 4th on goal difference if Spurs were to pull out a point against City and win the 2 games they were supposed to.
Yeah, it's going to be nervy, isn't it? It's going to be nervy if you're a Villa fan. If you're a Spurs fan by now, you probably think that it's a massive long shot. There's still a glimmer of hope, but for Villa, it's going to be nervy. Right, let's talk about Liverpool then. Who do we think is Liverpool's top assister in all competitions this season?
Salah.
Well, yeah, I'd probably say the same.
Well, you would be incorrect. Salah has 6 assists alongside Conor Bradley and Darwin Núñez. The top assister for Liverpool in all competitions this season is Harvey Elliott with 8.
Wow.
Is he unfortunate not to be really being spoke about in terms of England, George?
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying this for ages. I don't.
Sorry, I've got to cut in. Salah is in double-digit assists in the Premier League alone.
Oh, sorry, 2024. I asked the question
Incredible.
wrong. 2024. I wonder why Trent wasn't in there.
I thought for a second when you interjected there, Sam, I thought you were going to be like, sorry, are we talking about Harvey Elliott for England? He's terrible, which I thought was going to be quite a big stance.
Right. Some my mistake. Hurtling towards the end of the season. I've done a lot of podcasts. My haunches here. Like I'm struggling a bit. I'm just making mistakes. I've made a mistake there. Sorry. 2024. Harvey Elliott. I guess that's less of a surprise.
Yeah, it's less of a surprise for sure. I mean, but it's still a pretty impressive numbers from Elliott there. Like I don't understand why he doesn't get more recognition. I don't get it. He's been performing at a high level when he plays for Liverpool for a while now. He is pretty versatile, where he can play on the right hand side of a three, or he can play further forward if needed. He's a brilliant creator. He's a good ball carrier. He works incredibly hard. He's got end products in the final third. I don't get why there isn't more hype about him. I really don't understand it.
Because he's not really first choice for Liverpool. Does that mean that he doesn't get talked about for England as much?
He doesn't have a cemented spot in the Liverpool team, or
he has now, right at the end of the season. He's probably in their best 11 now.
It's probably too late, But for the last 3 years, he's been sort of dipping in and out of this team and making a really good impact and forming connections with different players. And I feel like for 3 years I've been sat here going like, you know what? When Harvey Elliott plays right centre mid in the three, it's really good. It's combination work with Salah and the way they interchange. And Harvey goes all the way to the byline. Salah cuts it. It's really good. And then Trent comes in and changes the dynamic, and Harvey still manages to find a way to basically figure that out and be effective. It's really good. And then he gets given these Europa League games over the course of this season, and he's consistently hitting the mark. So whenever he's given the opportunity, he nails it because he's really, really, really good. But he has never managed to lock down a spot in this team up until this point. And so that probably doesn't really do him too many favours, especially when, in the end, you'd be looking to take, him as a winger, I would imagine. And, it was already a busy area. And then Cole Palmer goes and produces this kind of season to just really throw it out the window. So, yeah, I can see why he kind of gets ignored by some people, but from a talent perspective, it's not fair. And it's good to see George going into bat for an EFL grad. I remember his time at Blackburn Rovers very well. Him feeding through balls to Adam Armstrong was an absolute cheat code for an entire season.
He was just a wide playmaker. He just get the ball on the right hand side and just played these huge switches, which I don't think anyone expected was going to be his game when he arrived on loan. But he's a brilliant player, and I think the same with Curtis Jones. I don't understand why these guys,
weird, isn't it?
Who are young English talents who do well for Liverpool consistently when they play, are just kind of seen as being not quite at the level needed. And then Kobbie Mainoo comes in, who's also obviously brilliant, but plays for 6 weeks at United and gets an England call up. I don't get it.
It does seem to be different rules for Manchester United players to come in. Maybe that's a tell into the future of Gareth Southgate. Who knows? I mean, we'll end the podcast as we started there talking about Gareth Southgate. Let's have predictions for this one then, George. I mean, Sam and I have spoiled the predictions a little bit by saying that we've predicted a draw. What's your score for this one?
Do I have to say?
Yeah, you can say it. It's fine. Safe place.
3-0 Liverpool.
3-0 Liverpool. Fair enough. I've gone for 2-2. Sam?
Me too, Desmond.
Did as well. Sam's favourite prediction. Didn't mention the table earlier when we were doing our predictions. Which
must have slipped your mind.
Which I should have done. I mean, I brought it back now.
Yeah, well
George
done.
still rock bottom, 196, limping towards the 200 mark with 6 points last week. Myself and Jonathan both scored 8 points, but that means that Jonathan and Sam are still 12 ahead, 232 to my 220. So some of my gnarly predictions for the penultimate game of the season need to come true for me to make up ground. That does us for this week's edition of Edge of the Box in association with UltimateFan. Find out more about them in the description. Thanks to the chaps for joining me, and we will be back next week as we always are to preview the weekend's Premier League action. Do all the things that I talk about every week to help the show, whether you're listening via audio or whether you're watching via video. Enjoy the last few weeks of the football season, so enjoy this weekend watching the football and stay safe.